Hello and welcome to the Client Experience Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Raya Gonzalez, and I have Claire Jones with us today, and we are going to talk about sustainable schedules, what the heck that is, how our brain works with that, and how we can create a lifestyle and create a calendar that we can actually sustain that's based in science. And so, Claire, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your business, and how you serve people.
Yeah, totally. So I call myself a small business consultant and strategist. So I help people strategize better, get to that next level in their business and scale up and grow in a sustainable way without burning out in the process, because
that's important. Yeah,
that's important, and I come from personal experience. I've burnt out way too many times, and I hope to help other people avoid that scenario.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I know that you recently launched a podcast. And congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
As someone who has a podcast, that's a very big deal. And it's called Balanced Business Leaders, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about the podcast. Who's your audience? And is your audience that you have for your podcast the target for who you're wanting to serve as well?
Yeah, totally. So I started the podcast because I wanted to tell my story, particularly when it comes to the many, many different lessons that I've learned over the years, because I've been working with small businesses for 15 years for my entire career. And so I have a lot of stories under my belt when it comes to the blood, sweat, and tears that comes to, running, growing, founding, developing, scaling small businesses. And I chose a podcast in particular because I know that that's a popular platform nowadays. And it's definitely the same target market that I work with in my clients with one-on-one work. And I just wanted to have broader exposure for my message and bring people more into the fold, because different people consume different media in different ways.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, for example, I'm actually a bad podcaster because I will create podcasts, I will be podcast guests, but I actually don't listen to podcasts myself because I am a completely 100% visual learner. And so I have to have visuals alongside with whatever I'm consuming. And if it's just auditory, it goes in one ear and out the other.
Yes.
But I know that not everyone's like that. Some people are auditory learners. Some people are visual learners. Some people are touch kinesthetic learners. And so I want to have my message accessible to those different learners.
Well, hopefully you're doing what we're doing, which is exploring. We're just exploring and dabbling and putting the podcast visual on YouTube. And, as we release the audio section of things, we're also releasing the visual portion to YouTube so that maybe there are other people who are like you and who can find you there. So if you're not, you should do that because...
Yeah, I do that. They all go up on YouTube.
Awesome. What's your, did they just do Claire Jones? Is that how they find you on YouTube?
No, it's Liminal Clarity. The name
Liminal Clarity. Okay. Perfect. Well, let's dive right into sustainable schedules. I know that you do have a 3-pillar system that you use with your clients, and then it starts with sustainable schedules. But within sustainable schedules, I know that you have multiple steps that go with that. So let's talk about step number 1. Let's go from the top and let's see what this looks like, because I'm fascinated because my schedule is a hot mess and it's all over the place. I make it work. Every week it ends up working. But if there was a better way to make it work, I can think that that would be preferable for not just myself, but for other people. So tell me a little bit about the science behind it and how you get started.
Yeah, totally. So I always start with a healthy mind platter as step number 1. And that is a framework that was developed by the NeuroLeadership Institute. And they've done decades of neuroscientific research, fMRI studies, psychological studies, stuff like that. And they've determined that there are 7 areas of your life, like time allotment areas, that should be prioritized and balanced to achieve optimal brain functioning. So you're basically using your day-to-day activities, your week-to-week activities to nurture your brain's needs, essentially, to make sure that it's getting what it needs to get in order to perform optimally. And so those areas are divided into 3 categories. Number 1 is social needs. And so that's connecting time and playtime. And then that goes to physical needs, which are physical time and sleep time. And then cognitive needs, which is downtime, time in, and focus time. And so those 7 areas should be scheduled in your calendar in some shape or form. There's different recommendations for like time allotment throughout the week.
Right.
But, there's also a really easy way to combine the activities as well. And that's something that I'm a huge advocate for, because I don't want you to schedule 7 new blocks of time in your already overloaded week.
Yes.
So like, for example, if you're combining connecting time and playtime, you could have a board game night with friends.
Oh, that's a good one.
Or if you're connecting playtime and physical time, you could have a soccer game with friends.
There you go.
So there's ways to combine them and still get the benefits that you're looking for. But the point is just intentionally scheduling this into your week so that you are feeding your brain the things that it needs to perform optimally.
How do you find that that's changed since COVID, since we can't, obviously board games and soccer is like a little bit off the, unless it's like somebody in your family who just coincidentally also enjoys board games and soccer. Yeah. How do you find that has changed, and are people still able to find this balance, with the new climate that we're in?
Yeah. I think you just have to be a little more creative. Like I've done board game nights online with friends during the pandemic. And, one of my go-to playtime activities is actually playing with my dog in the yard.
Yeah.
So it's not like I have to see people for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And another playtime activity that I use myself is art time. Like I'm a huge creative. And so art is playtime to me. And so there are ways, but the hardest for me during the pandemic is actually physical time, because the gym's closed currently. And so that's one that I've actually struggled with a lot during the pandemic. And so I've been trying to like incorporate walks in the neighborhood instead of going to the gym. And I have like 10-pounder weights at home that I like throw around every now and then. Yeah. But that's definitely been a challenge. So you just kind of have to be creative with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be hard for someone like myself who, I know that I have this like svelte figure, so it's hard to tell, but I'm not a gym rat. And so, like finding the physical time for somebody who is not as into, exercise, which we all need. And it's like a known thing that we need that, but, finding things that we can do, maybe it's stretching or, maybe it's something like along that lines, because that feels really good. And, I think it's very accessible, yoga or stretching or those types of things, very accessible, even to people who don't like to do like the whole CrossFit type thing.
Yeah. One of my favorites is dancing.
Oh, that's true. You can just turn it on, like do like Christina and Meredith on Grey's Anatomy and dance it out.
Yeah. Like I love dancing. I actually had a little dance party this past Saturday by myself with my Spotify.
I love it.
I just dance around my apartment and get down, and no one's watching, so I don't have to worry about how stupid I look.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
And if you want to bump it up a bit, I actually have leg weights that I put on sometimes when I am dancing around, just to make it a little more cardio focused. But if you're just dancing, there's all kinds
and that's kind of like, that's the physical and the play, what I mean?
Exactly.
Because your brain is engaging in both ways, you know what I mean? Like your endorphins are going, you're like having fun, you're like really thinking that's a good idea. Yeah. That's a really good idea. So what would be like the next step in the process? Once you've kind of looked at like, how can I incorporate some of these things into my schedule? What would be the next step in the process?
Yeah. So step number 2 is a concept that I call flexible time blocking. So we were talking about this before we jumped on, but how do you make your schedule so that it's flexible enough to move when shit happens?
Yeah, totally.
things always change on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis.
Yes.
Things always pop up. There's fires, you get in a car accident, your kid breaks their leg, stuff happens.
Yep.
And so I find that traditional time blocking techniques leave a lot to be desired because of that. And they also leave a lot to be desired because they focus on categories of tasks rather than specific tasks. And so for flexible time blocking, I'm a huge advocate for blocking out time for specific tasks in your calendar. And then it's flexible because then you can move those tasks around.
Yeah.
So if you do have a time sensitive meeting that comes up, or you get in a car wreck, or, something happens, you can still move that task around in your schedule to a free space and still get that task done, but it doesn't fall through the cracks. Because that's what I find when we're dealing with traditional time blocking is that you don't really know what to work on during that category.
True.
You spend a lot of time at the beginning of that time block deciding what you're actually working on. And that is a time waste, in my opinion. Then you don't really have that much flexibility either when it comes to moving those big blocks of time around. It's much easier to move a half hour or hour block around than it is to move a 5 hour, 3 hour block around.
What's really interesting to me is, so we use project management software, which I'm a big proponent of for anyone. Even if you're just by yourself, I think that you should use project management software, which there are tons for free if you're like, I don't want to pay for that. But I do pay for mine. I use Monday.com and I love it. And for my assistants, because I do have a team, I actually will block out a week's worth of tasks, and I don't block out which day they need to do it. I just say, this is what needs to be done this week. Mm-hmm. And so they have their expectations of what's going to be done, and then they mark it as done as they go along. Yeah. And then, but I don't do that for myself. I have mine scheduled by categories. And so it might be interesting to see what it would look like if I switched things around and said, this is did basically what I do for them and said, this is what needs to be done this week, including maybe not even using the calendar, but including saying having the lines of playtime of how many times I need to have playtime, how many times I need to have this. And then marking them as done as they're, as they're completed. And then just seeing how that works, just as an experiment to see how that works for me. And then doing it what did I get done this week? What did I not get done this week? And having it instead of, because I think I can get caught up in the calendar portion of things. Sure. And I know I'm not the only one that is that way. I do live and die by my calendar. I don't know what I'm doing from day to day. So the first thing that I look at in the morning, some people it's Facebook, some people it's their email. For me, the very first thing I look at every single day is my calendar. Because I'm okay, where am I at? What time? And it's the last thing I look at too. What time is my first meeting? What time is my, who do I need to prep for? What do I need to prep for? And then in the morning, it's a reminder, okay, this is what you're doing today. This is what you've got going on. And so maybe leaving that as the way that, since that kind of works for me, but having the specific tasks be carry that over and doing it in a way that's a little bit more similar to what I do for other people. But giving myself that structure that you're putting in a sustainable schedule. I'm a big to-do list person, so it kind of appeals to me. But it's an interesting concept to think about utilizing a project management software in that way. Those are I'm a geeky person. My degree is administrative management and information technology. And I always tell people don't ask me to fix your computer because that's not the kind of IT that I do. But I do have a background in really utilizing tools to help you run your, with the administrative management side of things. And so you just gave me a really cool experiment to try and see how that works. Like maybe next week, I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, totally. Please do.
Sounds like a really cool, like just a cool way to say, like, in terms of like, how many reach outs did you do? Like how many times did you, how many, like it's another way too, to track your KPIs. Like,
yes.
Like how many reach outs did you do? Did you check in with your team? Did you, did you do creative time? Like something that's creative for me. We don't have a social media manager at our business anymore, which I used to have. And so I've been using templates and creating things in Canva. And like that surprisingly has been like art for me. You know what I mean? Like just creating things that I'm going to share with, with the audience and that, that follows me on social media. So that's a really cool concept of being able to block it in the time. Like for some people, that's going to be really the ticket, is like blocking it in the schedule and saying, this is what's supposed to be done in the schedule, and or blocking it in your project management software and saying, this is what has to be done this week, including those really essential foundational pieces that we need to be able to do that. So I love that. I love that.
And I find that doing task specific blocks also holds you more accountable.
Yes.
Because if you are doing a categorical task, like, say you have a block for marketing, you can tell yourself that you're being productive because you're doing marketing things during that time, but you're not doing the specific marketing tasks that are going to move your business forward.
Right.
So it's a great way to procrastinate by being productive in ways that aren't actually producing the results you want.
Right.
So it makes you a lot more accountable. Like you said, with tracking your KPIs, one of the biggest marketing metrics that I track is how many one-to-one conversations am I having every week? And it can be a networking coffee. It can be a intro call. It can be a sales call. It doesn't matter. But that's what contributes directly to my sales numbers for that month.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely.
And so as long as I'm doing at least 3 every week, I can assert that I'm going to meet my sales goals for that month.
I love that. I love that. I'm also writing it down because the thing too is like with KPIs, because you and I they're completely separate industries, but sometimes it's hard to know, like, what's the metric? You know what I mean? Like, where do you start? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do I know what my goal? Do I just throw a dart at a board and say, like, my goal is, 3 1-to-1s or 5 1-to-1s or 2 1-to-1s or 15 1-to-1s or whatever it might be. But it's kind of cool to like hear what other people's KPIs are. Yeah, I actually reverse engineered it because I had a really good sales month. This was like a year ago. And I was like, all right, what did I do leading up to that month that contributed to the really good sales month? Oh, that's great. And that's when I figured out that if I do at least 3 1-to-1s every week, it will lead to a good sales month for me. That's awesome. Best. I'm writing it down. See, you guys, the thing is, this is live. Like, I'm getting value out of what Claire is saying. And, and so you might want to take notes too. I'm just saying I'm going to take notes because I like take the free coaching, guys. This is, I'm sure that if you wanted to have a little chat with Claire to see if it would be a good fit to work with her, I'm sure that's something that we'll have in the show notes in terms of, seeing if working with Claire is something for you. But, I just think that that's a great way to really see what is personal for you. You know what I mean? Like what works for you instead of the dartboard. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me what the next step in sustainable schedules is. Yeah. So step number 3 is now we're getting into self-regulation. So I have self-regulation as step number 3 because your emotional experience of your schedule is going to impact how tightly you keep to it. Yes. Because, you often get to a task in your calendar and you're like, I don't feel like doing this right. That's everybody. That's all have everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now that we have our healthy mind platter and our flexible time blocking set up, what do we do to help keep ourselves accountable to it?
Right.
And it's self-regulation techniques. And so this also comes from the NeuroLeadership research that I've incorporated into my work. And there are 5 different ways that you can regulate your emotions. Number 1 is situation selection. So that's when you select the situation that you're in and specifically select the situation that gives you the emotions that you want in that situation. And then there's situation modification. So if you're stuck in a situation that you can't select out of, then you can modify it to then produce the emotions that you want. And then there's attentional focus. And so that means that you're specifically focusing on one aspect or a couple aspects of the situation instead of the ones that are producing the bad emotions that you don't want to have. And then there's reappraisal. And this is actually the most successful out of all of the self-regulation strategies. And so this is when you reframe or reappraise your emotional experience. So choosing to use something as a reward instead of a punishment. This happens a lot with exercising, with physical time.
Yeah.
Like you focus more on the positive rewards of exercising rather than the negative experience of exercising. And it's the most successful in the long run because you are addressing your emotions and choosing to reframe them in a way that benefits you and helps you stay more accountable. And then the last one is response modulation. And this is actually the most harmful out of the strategies. And it's when you choose to ignore your own emotions and instead project a different emotion. So you're either putting on a fake smile and pretending like you're enjoying it, or, you're suppressing your negative emotions. That actually has a lot of significant impact on your cardiovascular health.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you are repressing or artificially enhancing your emotions in order to cope with the situation, it's actually going to be more damaging in the long run physiologically than it is to reappraise the emotions or select the situation or modify the situation or the other ones.
What do you see for reappraisal, like for your business clients? What are, like, aside from exercise, what in the business are people that you see over and over again that those tasks are ones that they hate doing, that they don't want to do? And what are some of the most successful reappraisal techniques or things that they're doing that are helping them get over that so that they can move forward and get past that? Because we're dynamic. And even if we have a team, there are things that we don't like. I mean, it's great. And I will say that, like, for me, when I'm like, I'll just use a real life example. This week, I'm switching to Acuity scheduling software. And there's a lot that goes into setting things up. And I kind of underestimated how much was involved in setting it up. Yeah. And so I started the process and I got a little frustrated. And then I was like, oh shit, I don't have to actually do this. I have an assistant. And I messaged my assistant. I was like, she has a lot of experience. And so I was like, have you ever worked with Acuity? She's like, oh yeah, totally. And I was like, can you do this setup for me? And she's like, yeah, send it on over. And I was like, hallelujah. So, I mean, there's times like that where I can reappraise and I can say, I can give this or hire out or whatever, those types of things. But there are other things where I'm really literally the only person that can do that thing. Yeah. So what are some of the scenarios that people find that your clients are finding that are things that they can only do? And how are they moving past the negative emotions of having to, because you just want to procrastinate or make it go away. Yeah. But you have to get it done. So what are some of those scenarios that you're seeing with people?
Yeah, I often see it in the marketing strategies arena. So one way that I see it is content creation. And then another way that I see it is follow-up. And so when it comes to content creation, this is actually one of my personal obstacles that I face on a weekly basis is that I have content creation blocked out every Wednesday and Friday morning. And I often sit down and don't feel like doing it.
Right, exactly.
So I have to sit there and like reappraise my emotions about it and be like, all right, so what am I trying to do with this task? What is the ultimate goal with the task? What is the purpose of this task? And that helps me reappraise my emotional approach to it, because then I can find the value of the task in the purpose of it.
Right.
And so that's one way that I do it. But I also see it come to people when it comes to following up. So when it comes to marketing strategies, you need to follow up multiple times in order to engage people in your products and services and engage in that relationship. But a lot of people feel like they're being annoying by continually reaching out to people or following up with people. And there's often a reappraisal that needs to happen is like, all right, what is the purpose of this? How does it fit into my overall strategies? And do they actually think that I'm being annoying in the first place?
Right.
You know, because 9 times out of 10, I find people thank me for following up.
Yes. Yeah. I teach that in client reengagement because that's a big obstacle that people are like, number one, they're embarrassed. Like if it's been too long, they're embarrassed.
Yes.
Like, especially if it's an existing client, so they're embarrassed and they're saying like, especially I have clients that it's been years.
Since
they've reached out to that person and they think that that person is going to want to sell them, that you are going to want to sell them something. And so they think that that person is not going to want to talk to you because they assume that you want to sell them something. So the way that I have reframed that for people is say like, you need to reframe your own mindset, because maybe you're approaching it that way because you do want to sell them something. And then they can sense, it's like, I call it commission breath. They sense it on you. So reframe it in a service mindset. How can you serve them? So then you call and you say, Bob, hey, it's Raya. I want to tell you first and foremost, I am so sorry. I have thought so many times to give you a call. And I end up like, for whatever reason, it slips my mind. And I just looked, and it's been 2 years since we've talked. And I just want to say hi. Like, how are you? Like, how are things? Like, how's Linda? Like, how have you guys been doing with this whole pandemic? And is there anything I can do for you? And like really reframing things. And if it's like a follow-up, not in that case, like if it's a follow-up of a prospect that you do want to move down the pipeline, just say like, I'm just reaching out to you to say like, I know that we talked 3 weeks ago. So much can happen in 3 weeks. I'm just checking. I love the phrase, I'm circling back. Like I was going through my follow-ups and I'm circling back because I realized that it's been 3 weeks since we've talked. Like, how are you? How are things? And then, if they don't respond, or if they do respond, just say like, oh, things are fine or whatever. Perfect. No problem. I'll follow up with you. Like I'll touch base with you in like 6 weeks. Is that okay with you? And then like you're establishing that you're going to follow up with them, and then you do it. Like you hold yourself to it. You set a task reminder, and then the first thing out of your mouth should be, as promised, I'm following up with you because it's been 6 weeks and I just wanted to say, hey, how's it going? Like what's happened in the last 6 weeks? How are you doing? And you're establishing like you have to go, like the work is it's inner work first. You have to go with the service mindset, because maybe they aren't your client. But maybe they know your client.
100%.
And so if you go with a sales mindset, wrong. But if you follow up with the service mindset, it feels better. It relieves the pressure. You don't have to make the sale. You're literally just checking in on somebody, another human being, and just saying like, hey, hi, how are you? Is there anything I can do for you? Because I have these unique skills. Like, do you need to connect with anyone? Like, because I know an amazing business coach, and strategist named Claire. She's awesome. She would be somebody who might be helpful for you. Like, whatever it might be. But remove the negative from your mindset and go in with it like you're offering a cup of sugar to your neighbor.
Yes, 100%.
Or you're offering to pick up groceries for the elderly lady across the street.
Yeah,
like if you're going with that heart and that mindset, it doesn't feel icky.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel, but if you go into it like, I have to do follow up on all these people because I need sales and I need this. And if you go and you know that the sales will come from doing these types of activities, then it relieves that pressure. So thank you so much for saying follow up, because I think I wouldn't have thought of it in that context, but that's something that I do and I believe so strongly in, because I think that people go into it thinking that they have to make sales. Yes. And that's like just the wrong mindset. It's about service, really about service.
Yeah, I actually use the term relationship mindset instead of service mindset.
Oh, I love that.
Because you're just building relationships.
Yes.
Businesses are built on relationships.
Yes.
You know, the phrase, it takes a village, applies to every aspect of life.
Yes.
You know, and I am continually amazed by the people who just discontinue talking to someone because it didn't result in a sale. And I'm like, that's when you're looking at your business relationships as sales numbers.
Yes.
And that makes it so impersonal. It makes it so and then you feel impersonal. The people that you're talking to feels impersonal. And I actually just have it scheduled into my flexible time blocking calendar.
Yeah.
So every week I send out my client check-ins. Every 2 weeks, I send out my follow-up check-ins.
Love that.
Quarter, I send out my database check-ins. And so it's just a task on my calendar that past Claire already decided was important.
Right.
So
exactly.
Present Claire just does the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, are there any other steps to this? Yeah, tell me.
2 more. Number 4 is delegation. So that's
my favorite.
Yeah. So that's when we move into, now that you have a good idea of what your schedule looks like and what your emotional experience of your schedule is, then you can start deciding what actually needs to be on my plate and what can be offloaded. So going back to your example with Acuity, you got to the emotional part of being like, this is not the emotional experience I want to have with this situation. Do I actually need to deal with it?
Yeah.
There is no.
Yes, I do not.
So that's what's actually going to make your schedule more sustainable as well, because we all have our own personal limits. We have our time limits. We have our energetic limits. We have our emotional limits, our physical limits. You know, some people can't sit in an office for 8 hours a day.
Right, exactly.
You know, and so what are your limits and how can you still strategize and move forward and get everything you need to get done, but by tapping into other people to help with that? Because again, it takes a village.
Yes, it does. It really does. And I think there's something to be said about, when we're doing VA matchmaking, we're always looking for somebody who has complementary skills and personality, because there's something to be said about having a duality of they can do the same thing. Because then there's the clone myself, like the extra set of hands on what you already know how to do. But there's also an element where I like to look at people who have maybe additional skills that you don't have, because then you're like, I'm reaching, this is something where I would have to hire it out. Yeah. But if you have that person on your team, you don't have to hire it out. Yeah. And so you can find like this particular person who did the Acuity for me. She also helps me with my reach outs like on LinkedIn, and she helps me, with, my prospecting and other things that I totally know how to do, but I am one person. Yeah. And so I, have her reach out with my words with me, and I do the follow up and everything like that. But she can do it as me because it is my words and exactly what I would type into the computer, and do things that are similar to what I do. But then she can also do things where like the Acuity thing, like I could have done that, but it would take me 3 times as long to do that, to figure that out. Whereas she's done it before and it took her like maybe an hour to like, an hour with special instructions, because I got feedback from somebody who went through the process and they're like, actually, your email sequence is annoying. And I was like, thank you so much for telling me that, because I will fix it. You know what I mean? Like I would not have known if they had not told me that, you know? Yeah. So that's so good. And delegation is a hard topic because sometimes you don't know what you can delegate. Yeah. And I always tell people to sit with a piece of paper, an iPad, a journal, whatever it might be, you know, an Excel spreadsheet, and literally not categorize, but inventory everything that they do. If it's multi-steps, then inventory those as a task by itself, each step. Yeah. Because sometimes even a multi-step task, you can delegate a portion of it. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and then say like, this is a just me. Like I'm really the only thing, but be honest. Yeah. If it's a just me. Yeah. Because sometimes you think it's a just me. Yeah. You could train somebody else to do the just me task. Mm-hmm. And then you can say like, I really hate this thing. I really dislike this thing. I always procrastinate this thing. You know, this is something I love to do, but I can't do enough of it because I run out of time. Yeah. You know, and then starting to break down that delegation in that way where you can start to see what a job description might look like, or, you know, or like, you know, what SOPs you need, you know, like standard operating procedures you need to be able to, you know, prepare for when that person comes in to help you. Because ideally, as business women, we're going to get to a point where we can no longer be a solopreneur. Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to scale. That's the only way to get out of having a job. Yeah. Because you're not a business owner, you're an employee if you are doing everything in your business. Yes. And so the only way that you can become a business owner or a CEO or, you know, whatever professional management term you want to use, you have to delegate things. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't mean you're giving it up completely. I mean, you have to oversee to make sure that that's being done the way that you want it to be done. And it has to reflect your values, your brand, your company, the way that it's done. And also you need to be mindful of hiring people who reflect that, you know, reflect who you are as a person because they represent you. Yeah. And then I think there's an element too that we should discuss in delegation. And I've done this even just recently, and that's hiring contractors. Like we have, we're in a group together called F-Bomb Breakfast Club. And there's somebody in our group named Wendy Kramer, and she has a business called Cedar and Holly. And I just engaged her in a retainer because she's a WordPress queen. Guess what? I'm not. Yeah. Not a WordPress queen. Like, but I need things or I want things for my website to represent me. But why would I try to figure it all out or train my VA to figure it all out or spend time training my VA to figure it all out when they could do what they do well? And I can hire somebody who very efficiently with their time can just get it done and probably do it in a way that I had no imagination was possible, which happened. Yeah, I hired her for my podcast page. And now my podcast page, which if you haven't seen it, please check it out. It is beautiful and it's fascinating to me. And so independent contractors is another way, you know, most of us aren't bookkeepers by trade, unless you own a bookkeeping business. And then you need to hire something else out. But, you know, like bookkeeping is probably one of the first things that we should, as business women, be hiring out to somebody else, because we need to know our numbers. We need to know where we're at with our business. But, if you are not like exceptionally skilled in that department, then a good independent contractor is really the way to go. So thinking about delegation in not just growing and scaling your team, but engaging other contractors who are more efficient at those tasks is a really important way to, sort of round out how you are operating at your higher self. I always say that delegation techniques and methods apply to everyone in your life. Yes.
They apply to your kids. They apply to your cousins. They apply to your photographers. They apply to your bookkeepers. They apply to your lawyers, your CPAs. These people might not be your employees, but delegating can even be just telling your cousins to bring the mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving.
True.
That's delegating, and when we're looking at the healthy mind platter, what tasks do you need to delegate personally? Do you need to delegate your house cleaning? Do you need to delegate your yard management? Do you need to delegate your kid care, your child care? Do you need to delegate your dog walks?
Yeah.
What are the things that aren't in your zone of genius? And what are the things that other people can perform better than you?
Yes.
And get those things done. It doesn't have to be full-time employees.
No.
I call team members on people's businesses includes part-time, full-time, and subcontractors, because most people can't afford to do full-time employees or even part-time employees.
Right.
And so how can you still get those needs addressed, but with resource management in mind?
It's almost like if we were to look at it from a healthcare perspective, your care team.
Yeah.
Like you may have a doctor, you may have several specialists, you may have a massage therapist or PT, or you may have like your personal trainer. Like you may have all these different people that are working on keeping your body in optimal condition and or either preventing or treating diseases and ailments that you have. And that makes up your care team. But we don't think about creating a care team for ourselves as business owners. And I love that you have that as well. That is awesome. And that what you said was step 4.
Yeah. So step number 5 is actually coaching habits. And so this is how we're going to avoid micromanaging the people that we're delegating to.
Got it.
Because micromanaging is going to fill up your calendar more, which is the opposite of what we're trying to do.
Yes. Double the work.
Yeah. And so when I say coaching habits, I'm not talking about becoming a certified professional coach, going through a coaching training. What I'm talking about is being more of a questioner with the people that you delegate to rather than a teller.
Yeah.
And so you're not just telling them what to do and you're not keeping them accountable yourself. You're coaching them so that they can tap into their own zones of genius, their own inner brilliances, and get shit done in their unique skill sets with minimal involvement from you.
Yes.
You're being the leader. You're not being their manager. You're not being their caretaker. You're not being their nagging, whatever you want to call it. But you are using questioning and reflection practices in a way that helps them figure out their own shit. Yeah. You're not figuring out their shit for them.
No.
Because again, that will overload your calendar even more. If you're constantly running around micromanaging everything that everyone else is doing, you're not freeing up time in your calendar to focus on what you need to focus on. And it kills morale, it kills productivity, it kills innovation, it kills creativity. So having these practices with delegation and coaching habits as a power team, you will impact your bottom line because everyone's going to be more efficient, more effective, more productive, more creative, more innovative in the things that they're doing.
I love that. This is something that I found a really interesting aspect culturally, because my team is actually all of my team is in the Philippines. And I work really well when someone gives me like a deadline and a task that I know how to do. And then that's it. Like, then I can within that, I've got I'm going over here and over here and everything. That works really well. And so when I was first a leader of a team, I tried to lead that way because I thought that was honoring their ability to get it done in the way that they felt best. And what my team came back was actually, you're creating a lot of anxiety for us because we don't know until the end result if we're on track. And so what we need from you is we need some more specifics. We need you, when you give us the task, to say, not necessarily be on top of everything, but be more clear in, okay, these are the milestones that I want you to hit. Yeah. I'm going to check in with you midpoint. and see if we're on track. Yeah. And then these are the ways that you are going to know that you're doing what I want you to do. Yeah. And then having like a midpoint check-in on a longer term project and say, okay, show me what you got. All right. Yes, this, no, this. Okay. This looks good. Yep. Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Keep going. I love everything. I love it all, and then they know that they're on track and that the end result, they have the feedback before it's due, that they know that they are on track and they're likely to have a happy result. And so, what I've learned now is to say, this is how I operate. I recognize that not everybody operates that way. How do you operate? Like, what feels good for you? Yeah, like, how do you need, like, what kind of feedback do you need? And the other thing that I do that helps me not micromanage is I require daily reports. And so I want an end of day report that says, this is what I did today. This is where, if anything, I got stuck. This is something that I wanted to do today that I didn't get done today. So that's on the top of the list for tomorrow, like those types of communication, because then I'm not like, did they do anything? Like, you know what I mean? Or like have that temptation to really dive in. I can let them go and know that things are being done. And so that type of coaching has been something new for me, because again, like, I'm just assuming that everyone's going to like feel good the way that I like to be coached, when in all actuality, when you are new to it, you have to have a conversation with your team, and not like, again, this is not talking about independent contractors, because those ones get to do whatever they want. You know what I mean? Like, they have a job to do and they do it however they want. But if you have an employee or an outsourced employee, you need to have a conversation where you say, this is my like intention and this is how I think I'm going to do it. But tell me how that makes you feel. Like, is that how you learn the best? Is that how you operate the best? If I did that, would that make you feel comfortable? Because I want to minimize the questions. Like, I don't want you coming back every 5 seconds and like, because I'm hiring you to take things off my plate. I want you to feel good. I want you to feel empowered. And I want to actually know what's happening. And I want to minimize my temptation to micromanage you. And then in the end of the day, like, shit's got to get done. You know what I mean? So, and I want to know that it got done, so that I can look at the end result and say, yes, this is flawless, or this is great, but we need one more little step. You know what I mean? Like, just one little thing to get it done. Yeah. And so, I love that fifth step. I think it's good. And I think it's good to recognize that people operate in different ways. And it's about having that collaborative conversation and the relationship together where you can have that collaborative conversation, because some people are going to be yes men. They're going to be like, yes, whatever. Yes. But if you haven't built up that expectation, so like from the very beginning, having that conversation saying, I expect that you're going to be open with me about, what, like, this is how I'm going to approach it. But is that okay with you? Like, is that going to give me the best result that I need from you? And if it's not, then let's talk about it. Let's have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually one of the key steps of effective delegation techniques is the regular check-in.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to have regular check-ins with your delegated tasks, with your delegated projects, to make sure that they're still on track.
Yes.
That is key to making sure that everything goes along the line. And then, with coaching habits, like, you're checking in with them, like, what was most useful for you in this conversation? What was the thing that helped you the most? Because then you're better prepared for future conversations with that person as well.
Amazing. Yeah.
Because you know what they're motivated by, what drives them, what is useful to them. And so that improves your relationship over time as well. And it's like, coming back full circle, we're talking about relationships here, and how you can use those to your advantage to be more efficient, be more productive, be more creative, be more innovative in the business that you're building and the life that you're building, because it's all intertwined at the end of the day.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I love that. Well, I wish that we had time to go over all three pillars, but that's something that people need to work with you about.
Yeah. I mean, we just scratched the surface too.
I know. But there's always two questions that I ask all of my podcast guests. And the first question is super important. And that is, if someone, I mean, we covered so much material, but if somebody was to walk away from this conversation and they could only absorb one thing from this conversation about sustainable schedules, about breaking things down, about being really successful in the way that they look at everything that needs to be done and the time constraints in which it has to be done, what would it be that you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, I think it really boils down to task strategy. So making sure that your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter tasks are connected to your overall goals.
Yeah.
It's an ever-evolving relationship. You need to address that on a continual basis because that's your own personal delegation techniques. You need to have check-ins with yourself on a regular basis in order to make sure that the tasks that you're doing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis are aligning with your overall goals. And it's just being more strategic with your task management.
I love that. A previous podcast guest, Elise Tager, she has like a block out time on her schedule called CEO time. Yeah, and she used that for just what you just described, but also for really evaluating the KPIs.
Yeah.
And for growth planning. Yeah. And it's like just literally check in with me time. Yeah. Like, how am I doing as a CEO? Like,
yeah, I call it strategy time, and I have 2 hours per week scheduled.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, the other question that I always ask, which gets us the most fun answer, is what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, that you've ever seen written or whatever, that has really stuck with you, become like a mantra or something that has been a guiding principle for you? And it can be anything at all. It does not have to necessarily be related to what we talked about today.
I'm going to have to say that it's imperfect action is always going to be better than perfect inaction.
Oh, I love that.
And because you're able to learn from the imperfect actions, you're still able to progress forward and tweak and pivot and adjust as needed. But if you wait for the perfect inaction, you're never actually going to get there because perfection doesn't exist.
True. It is true. Wouldn't it be great if it did, but it doesn't.
I mean, it'd be boring then, right?
I guess that's true.
Everyone would be living perfect little lives in a perfect little world.
Stepford wives. Yeah.
Yeah. Like definitely Stepford wives. But yeah, imperfect action is always going to continually move you forward because even if it fails, you're going to learn something from the experience. Yes. You're going to grow from the experience. Yes. You're going to have valuable input. You're going to have valuable data to use to better inform you moving forward. So I'm always an advocate for imperfect action. Even if it ends up flopping, even if you end up, creating a dumpster fire, you learn what not to do.
Yes, that's so, so true. I love that. And I will take that with me too. I'm already thinking of some examples of how that's happened for me and how that could happen in the future. And, just being encouraged that there really doesn't need to be shame around that or bad feelings around that. It's like really where they say, it's cheesy to say there are no failures, there's only lessons. But in all actuality, like we really do become very impacted emotionally, but also we really do learn a lot when things don't work out the way that they're supposed to. And, and even, my business is an example of like just going with it a little bit. Like, this business started out with just me doing virtual assistant work for financial providers. So that is not what I do right now. And it doesn't I would never do that again. Those are like phenomenal human beings, but it's just not what I was brought to this earth to do. And so I think you have to make mistakes. You have to just keep putting one foot in front of the other and just keep going. And sometimes it's going to work out in your favor and sometimes it's not. And when it doesn't, taking the moment to say like, wow, that's really embarrassing. Like, I feel like absolute dog shit right now. But what did I learn? What did I learn? What do I never want to happen again? What did, what good was in that situation? What, where was the good in that situation? And if there was nothing good, then okay, how can I flip this? How could this be a good situation? This is the absolute dumpster fire. What do I want instead?
Yeah. And like, what do I want to avoid in the future?
Yes.
Like, I want to avoid putting myself in that situation again.
Yes.
And that's a valuable lesson.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I really, really appreciate it. I definitely learned a lot. I'm excited to listen to your podcast.
I think the second episode launched yesterday.
Woo! Yay! That you guys, for those who don't have a podcast, you do not understand what an amazing feat that is. And so I give you all the props on the planet, and we will share all of your social media connections as well as your podcast information in the show notes. So please connect with Claire. If you are called to talk to Claire about whether or not working with her is the right thing for you, I invite you to do that. And I hope that you learned as much as I did. I mean, literally, I took notes. So I'm just saying, I think that it's something, there's a little tidbit for everybody in this podcast. So thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this has been another episode of the Client Experience Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Raya Gonzalez, and thank you for joining us this week and every week. And we look forward to seeing you next time.